The day I arrived at Riverside College, I promised myself one thing. I would keep my head down, finish my degree, and leave without getting close to anyone. A year earlier, I would have laughed if someone had told me I would transfer colleges because I was afraid of trusting people. I had once believed friendships were supposed to last. I had believed that telling people the truth about myself would make them understand me better. Instead, it had done the opposite. When I came out at my previous college, the people I had trusted slowly disappeared. Some stopped replying to my messages. Others suddenly found excuses not to sit with me. A few told me they had nothing against me, then treated me like I was someone they didn't recognize anymore. The worst part wasn't what strangers said. It was watching people who had once known everything about me decide they didn't want to know me at all. By the end of the semester, transferring felt less like a choice and more like an escape. So when my parents dropped me outside Riverside College with 2 suitcases, a backpack, and a box of books, I tried to convince myself that this time would be different. My mother hugged me tightly. "You'll be okay, Evan." I forced a smile. "I know." My father placed a hand on my shoulder. "Give yourself a chance." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I knew how. I watched their car disappear beyond the campus gates before turning toward the huge brick residence hall. Students were everywhere. They were laughing, carrying boxes, meeting friends, taking pictures, and calling their parents. Everyone looked excited. Everyone except me. I walked into the administration building and waited at the student services desk to collect my housing information. When my turn finally came, the woman behind the desk typed my name into her computer. "Evan Carter? That's me." She smiled. "Welcome to Riverside." "Thanks." She printed several papers and then paused. "That's interesting." I frowned. "What?" She looked at the screen again. "It says your housing arrangement was personally reviewed by Daniel Hayes." I had no idea who that was. "Who?" She glanced up. "Daniel Hayes. He works in student services. He's been here for years." "I don't know him." She gave me a curious smile. "Well, apparently he knows about your transfer." That made my stomach tighten. "How?" She shook her head. "I don't know. You'll have to ask him." I took the papers and stepped away from the desk. I didn't like surprises, especially surprises involving strangers who apparently knew things about me. I found my residence hall after several wrong turns and stood outside my assigned room. Room 217. I took a deep breath before opening the door. The room was quiet. 2 beds. 2 desks. 2 closets. One side had already been prepared for me. Fresh sheets covered the bed. A small desk lamp sat beside the bookshelves. Even the empty closet had hangers waiting inside. I stared at everything. Someone had prepared this. But who? I was still wondering when I heard footsteps behind me. "Evan Carter?" I turned. A man stood in the hallway holding a folder and a paper coffee cup. He looked nothing like the students around him. He was older. Much older. He had short dark hair touched with gray, a neatly trimmed beard, and the calm confidence of someone who had spent years learning how to handle difficult situations. He looked about 48. His clothes were simple but professional: dark trousers, a button-down shirt, and a college identification badge clipped near his chest. He looked at me with a gentle smile. "I'm Daniel Hayes." My eyes immediately moved to his badge. Student Services Coordinator. So this was the man from the housing office. "You're Evan?" he said. "Yeah." He held out his hand. I hesitated for half a second before shaking it. His handshake was firm but gentle. "Welcome to Riverside. Did you arrange my room?" Daniel nodded. "I helped with the housing request." "Why?" His expression changed slightly. "Because I heard you were transferring under difficult circumstances." My guard went up immediately. "How much do you know about me?" "Not much." "Then why help me?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the room. Because sometimes starting over is difficult enough without having to figure everything out alone. I didn't know what to say. He wasn't looking at me with pity. That was what surprised me. There was no uncomfortable sympathy in his eyes. Just understanding. Daniel lifted the folder. "These are some forms you'll need to complete. Nothing urgent." He handed them to me. Then he noticed one of my suitcases. "That looks heavy." "I can handle it." "I believe you." He smiled. "But I can still carry it." Before I could argue, he picked it up. I followed him inside. "You don't have to do this." "I know." "Then why are you?" Daniel placed the suitcase beside my bed. "Because I wanted to." Something about those words stayed with me. He looked around the room. "If you need anything, my office is in the Student Services building. You can come by any time." Even if it's not about paperwork? Especially if it's not about paperwork. I looked at him. For the first time since arriving at Riverside, I almost smiled. Daniel noticed. There it is. What? That smile. I immediately looked away. I wasn't smiling. He laughed softly. Sure. For some reason, his laughter made the room feel less unfamiliar. Before leaving, Daniel stopped at the doorway. One more thing. I looked up. You don't have to trust everyone here. I wasn't expecting that. But don't decide everyone will hurt you before they get the chance to prove otherwise. He gave me one final smile. Then he walked away. I stood there watching him disappear down the hallway. I didn't know it yet, but that conversation would become the beginning of something I never expected. I had arrived at Riverside College determined not to trust anyone. And somehow the first person who made me feel safe wasn't a student my age. He was a 48-year-old man named Daniel Hayes who worked in the college office. And I had a feeling I was going to see him again. Very soon. Over the next few days, I kept telling myself that Daniel Hayes was just another person at Riverside College. A helpful person. A kind person. A person who happened to know more about my situation than I expected. That was all. At least that's what I told myself. My first week at Riverside was quieter than I had imagined. I attended classes, learned the campus layout, spent hours in the library, and tried to avoid becoming part of anyone's social circle. I wasn't ready. Every time someone tried to start a conversation with me, I remembered what had happened at my old college. So I kept my answers short. Hey, you're new, right? Yeah. Where'd you transfer from? Out of state. Oh, cool. And then I would find an excuse to leave. But there was one person I couldn't seem to avoid. Daniel. His office was on the second floor of the Student Services building, behind a glass door with his name printed on a small silver plaque. Daniel Hayes, Student Services Coordinator. The first time I went there, I genuinely had a reason. I needed help changing one of my class schedules. I knocked lightly. Come in. I opened the door. Daniel was sitting behind his desk, looking through a stack of papers. His reading glasses rested low on his nose. He looked up, then smiled. Evan. I don't know why hearing my name in his voice felt different. You remember me? He removed his glasses. I'd be worried if I didn't. I stepped inside. I have a problem with my schedule. Sit down. I took the chair across from him. He pulled my schedule toward himself and studied it carefully. You're registered for 2 classes that overlap. Yeah. I didn't notice until yesterday. No problem. We can fix that. He started typing. I watched him work. He wasn't rushing. Most staff members I dealt with at my previous college seemed irritated whenever students needed help. Daniel seemed different. He actually listened. After a few minutes, he turned the monitor toward me. There. I moved you into the afternoon section. I looked at the schedule. That was fast. I've been doing this for 20 years. 20 years. He smiled. Does that surprise you? A little. Why? I don't know. You don't look like someone who's worked in a college office for 20 years. He raised an eyebrow. Is that supposed to be a compliment? I smiled. Maybe. He laughed. And for a moment the office didn't feel like an office. It felt comfortable. Almost familiar. Then Daniel leaned back in his chair. How are you settling in? Fine. He gave me a look. I sighed. Okay. Mostly fine. That's more honest. I looked down at my hands. I just don't know anyone. You'll meet people. Maybe. You don't sound convinced. I've been wrong about people before. Daniel's smile disappeared. He understood immediately. You don't have to talk about it. Good. But if you ever want to. I looked up. He wasn't forcing me. That mattered. Maybe someday. I'll be here. Those 4 words stayed with me after I left. I'll be here. I found myself returning to Daniel's office a few days later. This time I didn't have a schedule problem. I told myself I was just walking past. Daniel looked up from his computer. No paperwork today? No. Then why are you here? I froze. I was nearby. He smiled. Of course you were. I rolled my eyes. You're annoying. That's the first insult you've given me. Don't get used to it. He laughed. I ended up sitting in the chair for almost 20 minutes. We talked about classes, then books, then music, then coffee. I discovered that Daniel loved old jazz records and hated overly sweet coffee. He discovered that I preferred vanilla lattes and could spend hours reading novels. You're a literature person, he said. Is it that obvious? Very. What's your excuse? For what? For working around college students all day. He smiled. Maybe I like watching people figure out who they want to become. That answer surprised me. Did you always want to work here? No. He leaned back. I thought I'd leave years ago. Why didn't you? He looked toward the window. Somewhere along the way this place became home. I understood that feeling. Or at least I wanted to. A few days later, I found myself sitting outside the library with a book open on my lap. I wasn't reading. I was staring at the same paragraph for 10 minutes. That's a terrible way to read. I looked up. Daniel stood behind the bench holding 2 coffee cups. What are you doing here? Working. He lifted 1 cup. And I brought you this. I stared at it. Vanilla latte? You said it's your favorite. You remembered? Daniel sat beside me. I remember things people tell me. I took the cup. Thanks. He nodded. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Students passed by. Leaves moved gently in the afternoon wind. It was strange how comfortable the silence felt. Eventually Daniel looked at me. You're happier today. Am I? A little. I smiled. Maybe I'm getting used to this place. Good. He looked ahead. I was hoping you would. I turned toward him. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, because nobody should feel like they don't belong. My chest tightened. I looked down at my coffee. For some reason, I wanted to tell him everything. What happened at my old college. How lonely I'd been. How badly the rejection had hurt. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. So instead I said, can I ask you something? Anything. Why are you so patient with me? Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Because you remind me of someone. Who? He smiled faintly. My younger self. I hadn't expected that. You? Yes. You were shy. Very. I laughed. I don't believe you. You shouldn't judge a book by its cover. I smiled. He looked at me. And for one brief second, neither of us looked away. Something changed in that moment. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing happened. But I felt it. A quiet awareness. A strange warmth. I looked away first. Daniel stood. I should get back to work. Yeah. He started walking away. Then he stopped. Evan? Yeah. If you ever have a bad day, you know where my office is. I smiled. I know. He walked toward the administration building. I watched him until he disappeared through the doors. I didn't understand why his words affected me so much. Daniel was 48. I was 22. There were 26 years between us. We came from completely different stages of life. He was established. I was still trying to figure myself out. And yet, sitting beside him felt strangely natural. That evening, I caught myself thinking about him while lying in bed. Not about his job. Not about the college. About him. His laugh. His calm voice. The way he listened without interrupting. The way he remembered small things about me. I closed my eyes. Then I whispered to myself, this is dangerous. Because I was beginning to realize something I hadn't expected. I wasn't simply getting comfortable at Riverside. I was becoming attached to the man behind the office door. After that afternoon outside the library, something between Daniel and me changed. Neither of us said anything about it. We didn't need to. At least that's what I told myself. I continued going to classes, studying in the library, and occasionally stopping by Daniel's office. But now, whenever I saw him, I became strangely aware of every little thing. The way he smiled when he saw me. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The way he always seemed to notice when something was wrong before I said a word. And worst of all, I started looking forward to seeing him. Sometimes I'd walk across campus and catch myself taking the longer route because it passed the student services building. I'd tell myself I had a reason. I never did. One afternoon, I knocked on his office door. Come in. Daniel looked up. The moment he saw me, his expression brightened. Evan. You're always happy to see me. He smiled. Maybe I am. My heart skipped. I pretended not to notice. I need coffee. That sounds serious. It is. He stood and grabbed his jacket. Come on. You're leaving work? I have 10 minutes. We walked to the small cafe across the street from campus. Daniel ordered black coffee. I ordered my usual vanilla latte. The barista placed the cups on the counter. Same as always? Daniel looked at me. Apparently we're predictable. I prefer reliable. He smiled. We sat near the window. For a while we talked about ordinary things. My classes. His work. The weather. Then Daniel asked, have you made any friends yet? I shrugged. Not really. You're spending too much time with me. I looked at him. Maybe I like spending time with you. The words came out before I could stop them. Daniel became quiet. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled gently. I like spending time with you too. Something warm spread through my chest. I looked down at my coffee. Good. That was all I could say. A few days later, the weather changed. Rain came down hard across campus. I left the library without an umbrella and immediately regretted it. I was halfway across the courtyard when someone called my name. Evan? I turned. Daniel was standing beneath an umbrella. He walked toward me. You're going to get soaked. I noticed. He held the umbrella over both of us. Come on. We walked together. Our shoulders occasionally brushed. Neither of us moved away. The rain was loud enough that we barely needed to speak. After a few minutes, Daniel said, You've been quiet lately. Just thinking. About? I hesitated. Things? He glanced at me. You know you can tell me. I know. But I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Because the thing I was thinking about was him. We reached the student services building. Daniel stopped at the entrance. You should go dry off. I will. He hesitated. Then gently touched my shoulder. Take care of yourself, okay? His hand remained there for only a second. But I felt it long after he walked away. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the rain. The umbrella. His hand on my shoulder. And the way he'd looked at me. I finally admitted the truth to myself. I was falling for him. The realization scared me. Daniel was 48. I was 22. He wasn't some student I could casually ask out. He was an established man with a career and a life completely different from mine. And yet my feelings didn't care about numbers. They cared about the way I felt when I was with him. Say. Understood. A week later, something happened that made everything even more confusing. I was waiting outside the student services building when I saw Daniel talking to another staff member. She was around his age. They were laughing. She touched his arm. I don't know why it bothered me, but it did. I felt something twist painfully in my chest. Jealousy. I immediately hated myself for it. I turned around and walked away. Evan? I froze. Daniel had seen me. He caught up a moment later. Where are you going? Class. Your class starts in 40 minutes. I looked at him. I forgot. He smiled slightly. You're a terrible liar. I'm tired. His expression softened. Did I do something? No. Are you sure? Yeah. He studied my face. Then he quietly said, You don't have to pretend with me. Those words almost broke me. I looked away. I don't know what's wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with you. You don't understand. Then help me understand. I couldn't. Not there. Not in the middle of campus. So I simply whispered, I'm confused. Daniel nodded. That's okay. He didn't ask another question. He just stood beside me. That was Daniel. He never forced his way through my walls. He waited until I opened the door myself. Later that evening, I found myself sitting in his office. He was finishing some paperwork. I watched him quietly. Finally, he looked up. You've been staring at me for 5 minutes. I immediately looked down. I wasn't. You were. Maybe. He smiled. What were you thinking? I swallowed. Do you ever get lonely? His smile faded slightly. Yes. The honesty in his answer surprised me. How? He leaned back in his chair. People assume being surrounded by people means you're not alone. I understood exactly what he meant. Daniel continued. Sometimes the hardest loneliness is being around everyone and still feeling like nobody really knows you. I looked into his eyes. I know that feeling. I know you do. Silence filled the office. Then Daniel quietly said, That's why I worry about you. My heart began beating faster. Why? Because I know what it's like. He paused. And because I care about you. I couldn't breathe for a second. He seemed to realize how those words sounded. I know what you mean. But neither of us looked away. There was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Something uncertain. Something almost vulnerable. And suddenly I wondered whether I was the only one feeling this way. Daniel stood and walked around the desk. He stopped a few feet away. Evan? Yeah. You're important to me. My voice was barely a whisper. You're important to me too. Neither of us moved. Neither crossed the distance between us. Maybe because we both knew that if one of us did, things would never be the same again. Finally, Daniel stepped back. It's getting late. I nodded. Yeah. I stood and walked toward the door. Before I left, I looked back. Daniel was still standing beside his desk, watching me. I smiled. He smiled back. And when I walked down the hallway, I finally understood something. Whatever was happening between us wasn't only happening inside my head. Daniel felt something too. Neither of us was ready to say exactly what it was. But the feelings were there. And neither of us could hide them anymore. The first rumor started quietly. At first, I didn't even realize it was about me. I was walking across campus after my morning class when I noticed two students whispering near the library entrance. One of them looked at me, said something to the other, and both suddenly became quiet. I kept walking. I'd learned a long time ago not to ask what people were saying. But by lunchtime it became harder to ignore. I entered the student cafe and immediately noticed the silence. A few conversations stopped. Someone looked at me, then quickly looked away. I felt that familiar pressure in my chest. The same feeling I'd experienced at my old college. Not again. I grabbed my coffee and found an empty table. A few minutes later my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened the message. So you're the reason Daniel has been spending so much time away from his office? My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen. Another message appeared. People are starting to notice. I locked my phone. I didn't know who had sent them. But I knew exactly what they were talking about. Daniel. That evening I went to his office. He looked up when I entered. Evan. His smile disappeared when he saw my expression. What happened? Nothing. He stood. You've said that before. I put my phone on his desk. Daniel read the messages. His jaw tightened. Who sent these? I don't know. He looked at me. Have you received more? I nodded. He picked up the phone again. Don't respond. I wasn't going to. Good. He handed it back. People talk. I know. But that doesn't make what they're saying true. I looked away. They're saying I'm using you. Daniel became completely still. Do you believe that? No. Then don't let them convince you otherwise. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But old wounds have a way of reopening when you least expect them. Over the next few days, the whispers became louder. Someone had apparently seen us having coffee together. Someone else claimed Daniel was giving me special treatment. Another person said I was getting academic advantages because of him. None of it was true. Daniel never helped me with my grades. He never interfered with my classes. He simply listened when I needed someone. But rumors don't need facts. They only need people willing to repeat them. One afternoon, I overheard two students outside the library. That's him. The one who's always with Daniel? Yeah. Must be nice having someone important looking after you. I stopped walking. My hands tightened around my books. For a moment, I was 20 years younger emotionally. I was back at my old college. Back in those hallways. Back among people who had decided who I was without ever asking me. I turned around and walked away. I didn't notice Daniel standing near the end of the hallway. He had heard everything. Evan. I kept walking. He caught up. Wait. I need to go. Look at me. I stopped. Daniel stood in front of me. His expression was calm, but I could see the concern in his eyes. You don't have to run. I've done this before. What? People talking. People deciding I'm a problem. People looking at me like I'm some kind of mistake. Daniel's expression softened. You're not a mistake. You don't know that. I know you. My eyes began to sting. He lowered his voice. And I know what I feel when I'm around you. I looked at him. What do you feel? He hesitated. Something I don't want to lose. That answer hurt more than I expected. Because I knew exactly what he meant. And I was terrified of losing him too. That night things became worse. Someone posted anonymously on a campus discussion board. Student Services employee showing favoritism toward transfer student. Underneath it were photographs of Daniel and me. Nothing inappropriate. Just coffee. Walking across campus. Talking outside the library. But together the pictures looked intimate. The posts spread quickly. By morning everyone seemed to know. I didn't want to leave my room. I didn't want to see anyone. Most of all, I didn't want Daniel's career to suffer because of me. I stared at my phone for almost an hour before sending him a message. I'm sorry. His reply came almost immediately. For what? I typed. For causing all this. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. You didn't cause anything. I didn't answer. Because I had already made a decision. If staying away from Daniel would protect him, then I would do it. The next afternoon, I went to the housing office and asked about transferring to another residence hall. Then I packed a small suitcase. I folded my clothes carefully. Books, jackets. Everything that had started to feel like home. My hands shook as I closed the suitcase. I heard the door open behind me. Evan? I froze. Daniel stood there. He looked at the suitcase, then at me. His face changed. Confusion, fear, then hurt. What are you doing? I looked down. I'm leaving. Why? Because this has gone too far. He stepped closer. Leaving won't fix it. It might fix it for you. For me? I nodded. People are talking about you because of me. Daniel stared at me. Do you honestly think I care more about rumors than I care about you? I couldn't answer. He moved closer but stopped before reaching me. Evan, look at me. I finally did. His voice softened. You are not a burden. My eyes filled with tears. You don't understand. Then explain it. I don't want to ruin your life. You haven't. Your reputation is not more important than you. I shook my head. You're 48, Daniel. You have a career here. People respect you. And I'm just. Don't. His voice was firm. Don't finish that sentence by making yourself smaller. Silence filled the room. I wiped my eyes. Then why did you help me in the first place? Daniel looked at me for a long moment. I could see something changing in his expression. Something he'd been keeping hidden. Finally, he sat down on the edge of the chair. Because before you ever arrived here, I heard about what happened to you. I stared at him. What? I saw the circumstances surrounding your transfer. My heart pounded. I knew you had been hurt. Daniel looked down at his hands. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why? He looked back at me. Because I knew what it was like to feel like nobody was on your side. I couldn't speak. Daniel took a slow breath. At first, I only wanted to make sure you weren't alone. And now? His eyes met mine. Now it's different. The room became completely silent. I finally understood. The rumors weren't what frightened me most. The truth was, because somewhere between the first coffee and the rainy walks, Daniel had become much more than the man behind the office door. And I was terrified that admitting how much he meant to me would be the one thing that could truly destroy everything. For several seconds, neither Daniel nor I moved. The suitcase was still open on my bed. My clothes were folded inside. My entire plan for leaving Riverside was sitting between us. But suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted to go. Daniel stood near the door, watching me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. There was no professional calm. No reassuring smile. He looked nervous, almost afraid. I swallowed. When you said things were different now. Daniel nodded slowly. I meant it. I looked down at my hands. Different how? He took a breath. I don't know how to say this without making things complicated. Try. He gave a quiet laugh. You always make that sound easier than it is. I smiled faintly. Then the smile disappeared. Daniel stepped closer. Evan, I need you to understand something first. What? I never wanted you to feel like you owed me anything. I don't. I mean it. He looked directly into my eyes. I helped you because I cared. But I never wanted my help to become a reason you felt obligated to stay close to me. I felt my throat tighten. You never made me feel that way. Good. He paused. Because what I feel for you isn't about gratitude. My heart began beating faster. I knew where this conversation was going. Still, I needed to hear it. What do you feel? Daniel looked away for a moment. Then he faced me again. I care about you more than I should. I barely breathed. He continued. I tried to convince myself it was just concern. You were new here. You had been hurt. I thought I was simply trying to make sure you didn't go through it alone. He smiled sadly. But then you started coming into my office. I smiled. You remember that? I remember everything. His voice softened. I remember the first time you smiled at me. I remember the coffee you like. I remember how you pretend you're not upset when you are. He took another step closer. And somewhere along the way I stopped thinking about you as someone I was helping. I looked into his eyes. Then what was I? Daniel's voice became almost a whisper. Someone I couldn't stop thinking about. My eyes filled with tears. I quickly looked away. I thought I was the only one. You weren't. The words were simple. But they changed everything. I wiped away a tear. Daniel? I know what you're thinking. What? About the age difference. I nodded. He continued. I'm 48. You're 22. That's not something I take lightly. I know. And I work at this college. I know. I don't want there to be any question that I'm using my position or influencing your choices. You're not. I need you to be certain. I looked at him. I am. Daniel was quiet. You're sure? Yes. How? I took a breath. Because I don't feel like a student around you. He listened carefully. I feel like myself. His expression softened. You make me feel safe, I continued. Not because you protect me. Because you listen to me. You respect me. You never tell me what I should feel. Daniel's eyes became glassy. And that's why I'm not leaving. He looked toward the suitcase. Then back at me. You mean that? I nodded. I do. For the first time Daniel smiled. Not the polite smile he gave students. Not the calm smile he used at work. It was a genuine smile. Warm. Relieved. Almost emotional. He slowly held out his hand. I looked at it for a moment. Then I placed mine in his. His fingers closed gently around mine. Neither of us spoke. We simply stood there, holding hands. After everything that had happened, the simplicity of that moment felt almost overwhelming. Daniel looked at me. I've wanted to do this for a long time. I smiled. So have I. He stepped closer. Then stopped. Can I kiss you? My heart was pounding. I nodded. Yes. Daniel moved slowly, giving me every opportunity to change my mind. I didn't. Our lips met in a gentle, brief kiss. There was no rush. No desperation. Just warmth. When we pulled apart, we both smiled nervously. I laughed softly. That was terrifying. Beautiful. Daniel smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. I looked down at our hands. Then I realized something. The fear that had followed me since my old college wasn't gone. But it didn't control me anymore. Because this time I had chosen to trust someone. And Daniel hadn't asked me to forget my past. He had simply shown me that my past didn't have to decide my future. I closed my suitcase. Daniel watched me. So you're staying? I looked at him. Yes. His smile returned. Good. I laughed. You sound relieved. I am. He squeezed my hand gently. More than you know. That evening we walked outside together. The campus was quiet. The sun was setting behind the trees, covering the buildings in warm golden light. For the first time since arriving at Riverside, I didn't feel like I was running away from something. I was walking toward something. Toward Daniel. Toward a future I hadn't expected. And maybe, just maybe, toward a kind of love I had once believed wasn't meant for me. The weeks after our confession felt different. Not because everything suddenly became perfect. It didn't. The rumors were still there. Some people still looked at us differently when we walked across campus together. A few whispered when they saw Daniel waiting for me outside the library. But something inside me had changed. For the first time, I wasn't living my life according to what other people might think. I was choosing what made me happy. And I was choosing Daniel. We were careful. Daniel continued treating me exactly as he always had at work. He never used his position to give me special treatment, and we kept our personal relationship separate from college business. Outside the campus offices, though, everything felt different. Our coffee trips became little dates. Our walks lasted longer. Sometimes we would sit in the park near the river and talk until the sun disappeared. Daniel told me stories about his younger years, the mistakes he'd made, the people he'd lost, and the dreams he'd once abandoned. I told him about my childhood, my family, and the things I'd never had the courage to tell anyone at my previous college. With Daniel, I didn't feel like I had to hide pieces of myself. One Saturday morning, we walked through a small farmer's market downtown. Daniel stopped at a bakery. Wait here. I laughed. Why? Trust me. A few minutes later, he returned carrying a paper bag. He handed it to me. What is it? Breakfast. I opened it and found 2 warm cinnamon rolls. I smiled. You remembered. Of course. You really remember everything. Daniel shrugged. Only the important things. I looked at him. Am I important? He didn't hesitate. Very. That simple answer made me smile for the rest of the morning. Our relationship wasn't dramatic. It was made of small things. Daniel remembering how I liked my coffee. Me texting him when I knew he had a difficult day at work. His quiet, be careful, whenever I left late at night. My habit of stealing his jackets whenever the weather became cold. One evening, I was studying in the library when Daniel came to meet me. You're still working? I have an exam tomorrow. You've been studying for 4 hours. 5. He shook his head. You need a break. I can't. You can. He took the book gently from my hands. Daniel. Come on. Where? Dinner. I have an exam. You'll survive one evening without studying. I laughed. Fine. We walked to a small restaurant near the river. After dinner, we sat outside beneath strings of warm lights. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel looked at me. "Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it, then smiled. "Yes." "Really?" "Really." He nodded. "I am too." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I was so afraid when I came here." "I know. I thought I'd have to start everything over." Daniel squeezed my hand. "You did start over." I smiled. "Maybe. But you didn't have to do it alone." I looked at him. "No, I didn't." A few weeks later, the campus rumors finally began to disappear. There were still occasional whispers, but they no longer mattered. I had learned something important. People could misunderstand me. They could judge me. They could create stories about me. But they couldn't decide what my relationship meant. Only Daniel and I could do that. One evening, we returned to the bench outside the Student Services building. It was the same place where we'd first talked about loneliness. The sunset was turning the sky orange and gold. I sat beside him. "Do you remember the first day we met?" Daniel smiled. "You were suspicious of me. I had good reasons. You asked me why I was helping you. And you said because I looked like I needed someone who wasn't in a hurry." He laughed softly. "I remember." I leaned against his shoulder. "You know what I think now?" "What?" "I think you needed someone too." Daniel became quiet. Then he rested his head gently against mine. "Maybe I did." We sat there in silence. After a moment I asked, "Do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" "Helping me." He looked at me. "Never. Even with all the rumors?" "Especially then." I smiled. "I don't regret it either." Daniel took my hand. "Good." I looked at our fingers intertwined. When I first came here, I thought being alone was safer. And now? I looked into his eyes. "Now I know being loved doesn't mean losing yourself." Daniel smiled. "And being with you doesn't mean protecting you from everything." I raised an eyebrow. "What does it mean?" He gently squeezed my hand. "It means walking beside you." My eyes filled with tears. I leaned closer. "Then keep walking beside me." Daniel smiled. "I will." I kissed him gently. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The campus around us continued moving. Students walked past. Cars traveled along the road. The evening slowly became night. But I didn't feel afraid of being seen anymore. I had spent so long believing that being rejected meant there was something wrong with me. Daniel had taught me something different. Sometimes people leave because they don't know how to accept who you are. That doesn't mean you're unworthy of love. Sometimes the right person simply comes along and reminds you that you never had to become someone else to deserve it. I came to Riverside College believing I was starting over alone. Instead, I found Daniel. A 48-year-old man who never tried to control my life. He never asked me to forget my past. He never promised he could protect me from every difficult day. He simply listened. He stayed. And when the time came, he let me choose. So I chose him. Not because I needed saving. Not because he had helped me. Not because I was afraid of being alone. I chose him because when I was with Daniel, I could finally be completely myself. And he chose me for the same reason. Two people from completely different stages of life had somehow found the same quiet place in each other's hearts. And this time, neither of us was going anywhere.